So, 2 weeks before Season 2 of Arcane dropped, I binged all of Season 1 for the first time. And I made a couple of videos discussing a lot of the themes there. I've been making videos for every episode of Season 2, and I've talked about mortality, progress, corruption, hope, some structural issues. For the past month and a bit, I've been absorbed by nothing but Arcane, and I think I've made some good videos on it. I'm happy with what I've said, and yet at the same time, it feels like only just now, after finishing watching Act 3, that I finally understand Arcane. And now I love it even more. This video is going to focus mostly on episode 7, because I do like making a video for each one specifically, but there is a broader theme to discuss, and I really want to dive into it, so let's get going. I will start by saying this now though, I think episode 7 is a near flawless episode of this show. I don't know what other people think, this might be a controversial opinion. I've only just watched Act 3 today, and I have been avoiding all media reaction for the sake of getting spoilers, so I don't know what other people think. I imagine some might argue, why, when you've only got 9 episodes to fit so much stuff in, would you use up an entire episode on Ekko going back to his world and Jace discovering his alternate dead body? Why use up so much runtime on this? And to answer that quickly, if anyone does argue that, I don't even know, my response would be kind of what I mentioned in past videos, that when people feel this season has pacing issues, that's not necessarily the result of the runtime. This show can still be perfectly paced with the time they have, just so long as the structure is clear enough. That's my theory. Using up episode 7 for something so slow does not necessarily damage the other episodes. And secondly, that's kind of what's so powerful about this episode anyway. Stepping out of all of the reality, all of the drama, all of the tension, all of the pace, the way things have felt so tragically compelled down certain paths, to just step away from it all and breathe. Which I think is in many ways what Silco tells Jinx in episode 8.
I think the cycle only ends when you find the will to walk away.
This episode is us walking away for a moment, seeing it differently. An episode like this cannot be so beautiful unless you let it breathe, unless we feel like we're getting time to just sit somewhere and admire the world for a moment. So that is what it does. And I'm a sucker for these kind of tropes in shows, you know, exploring what could have been with all of its beauty and its tragic nostalgia. It is heart-wrenching to see Ekko tell Benzo how much he cares for him, to see Jinx as Powder here, to just see these kids whose whole lives have been absorbed in war and awful responsibility, just getting to be kids, just getting to dance and live as kids should do, as Vander always hoped.
What's the point if we can't raise an ankle biter or two?
It is beautiful, it just is. Heimerdinger ready to die now that he has truly lived. Ekko and Powder's kiss, which I think feels so powerful because she does understand what's going on. It's just a theory, but I'm fairly sure Powder has twigged that this is a different Ekko. I don't think she grasps the full reality of it. I think part of her is kind of turning a blind eye because it is so bizarre to try and grasp the reality, but I do think you see it in her face at moments. I think that's also why when they go to kiss and Ekko says,
"Can we just pretend like it's the first time?"
Powder isn't confused by that request. I think she gets it. And maybe I'm wrong, but somehow the idea of that makes it all hit me in the gut so much more. Anyway, apart from being beautiful and very moving, why is all of this important? Why do we need so much of this in the show? Well, it's to do with progress, that old chestnut. It starts with Act 2. I argued in my last video that Act 2 was all about escape. Jinx and Vi finding themselves compelled along certain paths when, all of a sudden, a wild Vander appears. And then there's some dreamy, wishful hope that they could just go back to the way things were as a family. Just erase everything that's happened and all of its consequences and live within a sugary painted montage. And we can make similar arguments about other characters, but especially this commune of victors, a place of peace to set aside all this violence and tragedy and just live as a happy, enlightened collective. Escape humanity's worst impulses. Can that be achieved with an enlightened, semi-magical leader to guide the way? I think the slightly cult-like shades to that question are fitting. What episode 6 says in answer is a resounding no. You can try and escape the worst of humanity, but there's no getting away. All our best qualities depend entirely upon our worst one. They are two sides of a coin, they are the Tao, they are in inseparable. So it starts off all rosy, but then Ambessa and Singed and Jace all come knocking and they bring destruction. Vanda's humanity cannot be separated from the beast, everything goes wrong, it's awful. Then we get to this episode, and everything in an alternate reality is not awful. To an extent, this is also escape, right? Ekko even partly wants to stay here, but it's giving us a different answer to the question of can humanity escape its worst impulses? Can it live happily? The answer now is, yes. In a way. But crucially, you don't achieve that by some enlightened semi-magical leader, nor an iron-fisted ruler, nor through technology. Don't get me wrong, there's still technological developments in this world, there's still innovation, but we see a key contrast between lofty figures in great academies working tirelessly for progress, working to change the world, and this innovators competition, what is essentially a fun community event. A party. And yeah, no doubt they want to create things that do help the world. That's definitely not a bad thing, that's good. But it's a competition that's not really about ambition or anything, it's just about community, it's just about bringing people together. And I love how similarly, Heimerdinger has been living here for
1,128 days, 6 hours, and 20 minutes.
Presumably like Ekko, he took over from an in-universe version of himself, the man who was a renowned scientist. And what has he been doing all this time, apart from waiting for Ekko? Has he been teaching people? Has he been exploring the academia or the scientific developments here? Or, I don't know, anything like his old self? No, he's been playing music, just enjoying creativity for creativity's sake, enjoying the pleasures it brings to others, bringing people together. What does he sing? A song about just living, just moving with time as it is, not stressing too much about where the chips fall. My favourite example is the montage we get of Ekko, Powder and Heimerdinger working quite literally on a scientific advancement with groundbreaking consequences. And what's the focus of this scene? Ekko and Powder bonding. Right down to the music, right down to the split screens of them mirrored. It even begins with Ekko coming to light a candle for Vi when Powder is crying, an act that means something to her. I actually find this the most touching scene in all of the show. There's something so poignant and liberating about them just having fun, working together on something. I cannot express how much I love this scene, but yeah, that's not to say technology is bad, get rid of it all. It's to say you can't expect technology to solve all problems. When you try to make that the solution to all problems is when you're going wrong, because it's never going to be that simple. There's always good tech could be used to do bad, or could be hoarded for power, or corruption, or could have unforeseen side effects. There's all sorts of sociological, systemic problems that hinder the possible good of technological advancements, we could say, and will never be as powerful as just bringing people together. And we can make a similar secondary point, because Silco wanted to secure peace through conflict, the base violence necessary for change. Ambessa argues something similar, where Caitlin questions,
is peace always the justification for violence?
How was all of that stuff resolved in this world? Well, surprisingly simply.
The greatest thing we can do in life is find the power to forgive.
Through forgiveness. The thing Jinx's imaginary dead Silco tells her about walking away from the cycle of violence. Does that seem weirdly simplistic? To just magically get along, especially when you contrast these rosy scenes with Jace carrying his hammer like a burden of shame through a barren apocalypse. Does it also sound like a contradiction? Why is it meaningful and good for these people to just forgive and move on, where this commune is a fanciful dream? Why is this good where this is doomed to go wrong? Hopefully you can see what I think the answer is. I do need to explain it a bit further though. The thing I misunderstood was Jace. Perhaps stupidly. I thought he did a bad thing in episode 6, a thing the show deliberately framed as bad, with him in the darkness where Victor was the light, and he seemed this ragged, frenzied man, not thinking straight, he barely speaks. I thought here's Victor attempting to do something good, create a peaceful place where humanity can live peacefully and freely, and then Jace, symbolic for humanity's worst impulses, has to ruin it. That event will change Victor. That will force him to conclude you can't just help humanity evolve, help it supersede the bad aspects. No, that didn't work, so now I'm going to basically conquer it with an army and will forcefully hack into everyone's brains, make them see what I see, think like I think, all be a unified collective. I thought Victor was doing good until, because of Jace, it fails. Now he goes about trying to achieve good, but in a very dark way. However, I think I was wrong. And it's not to say Victor doesn't change. He does. I'll probably talk about it in a video about episode 8, but I think this was always dark and always flawed, only masquerading as the light. Because, like, he already had control of all of these people, didn't he? He had already kind of hacked their brains and made them think like he did. I didn't quite understand what it meant at the time, but these people are already subservient to his perspective, partly absorbed by him because it appeared to be a good thing, because it healed them, because they wanted to live in a place of peace. When he died, they all also died as though the exact same being. They chose to happily be kind of absorbed by him. Is that lots of people achieving peace, or is that just one person controlling everyone and calling it peace? Victor wanted to supersede the worst sides of human nature, but in doing so would obliterate humanity itself. He is doing it in a more gradual, less violent method here, but the result is exactly the same. Remove all conflict, all contrast, all difference until you're left with
Fields of dreamless solitude. There is no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit.
I adore this bit in the show. So often this kind of trope in fiction comes down to one side arguing humanity is reckless, we've got to stop all of these horrors, make them do better, and the other side saying
people deserve to choose their own fates.
But it's not just that in this show. It's not just the fact Victor is removing humanity or that the means are questionable. It's the fact none of this is even peace in the end. It's just the absence of conflict. The absence of everything. Humanity's imperfection is its beauty, and so are its differences. Without them you have only a sea of nothingness that your own creator would come to despise. It's inherently illogical here. We're getting a little bit abstract, but, you know, harmony is built on difference. Two or more opposed things coming together, finding harmony in spite of their differences, rather than erasing all the difference in the first place. That's the point. This is about unifying the world by erasing the differences. This is about unifying the world by bringing people together in spite of them. Removing the conflict versus actually solving the conflict. I love how so much of the big events in this show happen on a bridge, the bridge, the literal symbol of two opposed things being joined together. Hardly a perfect unity in the beginning of the show, but yes, I think it's relevant. I once made a video all about the symbolism of bridges. It does seem simplistic and kind of rosy. I think it's meant to in this dreamlike glimpse of the alternate world, but that makes the point no less real. Harmony is about resolving differences, and if that still seems simplistic, then yeah, that's when it finally clicked for me. How expansive the two sides of the same coin metaphor is in this show. It's kind of what we've been seeing in all the imagery across the entire series of Jinx and Vi opposed, even within their own identities, like how seamlessly Jinx just blurs from being the villain to a hero to both to not quite sure. Is she Jinx? Is she Powder? Is she something else? Is Vi the good protagonist, or is she using the grey to hunt down her sister? Is Victor a hero or a villain? A lot of people were taken aback by how quickly Caitlyn moves from this to this. Jace is literally framed as doing something bad before we recognise the total opposite of the situation, and then imaginary Silco says this.
We build our own prisons. Bars forged of oaths, codes, commitments. We inhabit these cells, these identities, and call them us.
It really is a kind of yin and yang point. Labels, identities, rigid visions on the fluid people we truly are. Arcane has constantly been a show about the blurry perspective of heroes and villains, not just presenting a messy middle ground where everyone is both of those things and it's nuanced grey, but also deliberately exaggerating characters into one of those two extremes at different times, because that's humanity. A bunch of people trying to find clarity through easy definitions of each other. And weirdly, for all of the problems that creates, it also comes out kind of beautiful. How easily two people at each other's throats might just come together. how remarkably simple that can sometimes be. We need this episode. We need it to remind us that humanity is flawed, but not also doomed. You know, things still go wrong in this world. Vi dies in this world. Powder isn't entirely fulfilled. There is a lot of talk about her needing to grow to achieve more than just hanging around these innovator competition parties, because that's natural. People do need to feel like they're growing, the same way flowers bloom. They need to feel they can spread their wings. And all of this from Ekko's viewpoint as well. A man who knew you needed to give people enough to live, not just survive. But also a man who had entirely given up on Jinx. Saw her as an example for all that could be wrong with people. She was unequivocally bad.
There's no good version of me.
Some people are just bad and need to be removed for society to thrive. And similarly, maybe this is a tenuous argument, Zorn needed to be replaced with this kind of community, overtake the other one. But you don't resolve humanity's conflict by erasing humanity, and you don't bring people together by removing half of them. I think I once talked about this in the Jojo Rabbit video actually. You know, those who seek to defeat all dark often lose themselves to that dark they're chasing, often lose sight of the light they could have been cultivating. Eradication is a dangerous road in that sense. Powder gives Ekko, and I think all of us as an audience, some much needed hope.
I used to dream the Undercity could be like this, but somewhere I got consumed by all the ways it wasn't. I gave up on it, gave up on you.
I think that's the conclusion. Arcane is a show all about how things go wrong when you try to supersede the worst of our world through progress, through advancement. Difference and conflict absolutely leads to war and horror and destruction, and that's a bad thing to be avoided, but difference can still lead to community, depends on it. And do you know the main reason this scene matters? As I've sort of hinted throughout this video, it provides the answer to pretty much everything we've been saying. The Innovators competition, Heimerdinger's song, the very thing Ekko has to do in this world before he is ready on a character level to move on, which is to enjoy the present moment, not to absorb yourself with the future or chain yourself to the past. Just be as you are and dance. This is, after all, what does bring people together. I think it's kind of beautiful how something as simple and clear as that is at the centre of all of this. Having found that, he is ready to go back and become the true hero of this story. Hooray! You might be able to sense there's a bigger point to make about Jinx here, but I think I'll save that one for another day. It's so not what I was expecting. A very intricate story of a nuanced political struggle in a very precise world, suddenly surpassing all of that to become an all-encompassing struggle of humanity itself. I don't think it's the story I would have asked for. Part of me does also pine for a version of Season 2 all about the Undercity and the topside, but that doesn't make the story we do get and its themes any weaker. It's absolutely wonderful. You know what? This episode is flawless. It's not almost flawless, it is. I love it, and let me know what you think. Comment both your good and your bad thoughts. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, buy me a coffee if you fancy that. Even check out my second channel. But otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Grace, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Chad Bramwell and Joshua C. Follier. Thank you.